My girlfriend whispered, "I can't marry into poverty," and broke up with me in 10 minutes. After dinner at my parents' 1970s ranch house, I said, "Okay," went back to work, until the newspaper headline exposed. I learned something interesting about myself this week. Turns out I've been using my family's lifestyle as an inadvertent filter for relationships, and I didn't even know it until someone failed the test spectacularly. The conversation that ended things lasted maybe 10 minutes, but it's taken me 3 days to process what actually happened. Not the breakup itself, that was probably inevitable, but the assumptions that led to it, and what those assumptions revealed about someone I'd been dating for 8 months. I'm a marine biology professor at the state university here in our little coastal town. It's not glamorous work, but I love it. Research, teaching, spending time in tide pools and on research vessels. The kind of life that looks modest from the outside, which apparently is exactly the problem. Sable's been my girlfriend since last spring. She works in pharmaceutical sales, drives a leased BMW, lives in one of those new downtown condos with the floor-to-ceiling windows. Smart, ambitious, always dressed like she stepped out of a business magazine. We met at a conference mixer, and I was honestly surprised someone like her would be interested in a professor who shows up to dinner dates with sand still in his hair. Last weekend was the first time I'd brought her home to meet my parents. Not because I was hiding anything, but because my folks live about an hour up the coast in the same house I grew up in, and our schedules hadn't aligned until now. The drive up was fine. Sable seemed excited, asking questions about my childhood, making jokes about meeting the people who made me who I am. Normal relationship milestone stuff. Then we pulled into my parents' driveway. Their house is a 1970s ranch style. 3 bedrooms, maybe 1,500 square feet. Brown shag carpet in places. Wood paneling in the living room. Furniture that's been reupholstered twice because my mother doesn't believe in throwing away something that still works. My dad's truck in the driveway is older than I am, but he maintains it like a classic car because that's who he is. If something works, you take care of it. I watched Sable's face as we walked to the front door, and something shifted. She got quiet, started looking around like she was cataloging everything she saw. Dinner was my mom's famous tuna casserole, served on the same dishes they've had since their wedding. My dad told stories about his work days. My mom asked Sable about her job. Normal family conversation, but I could feel the tension coming off Sable in waves. About halfway through dinner, she asked my dad what his career plans were. He's 64. He's been retired for 3 years. But she said it like she genuinely thought he was unemployed and looking for work. When my mom mentioned shopping at the thrift store for my cousin's baby shower gift, Sable actually winced. Not subtly, the drive back was quiet. Really quiet. I figured she was processing meeting my family, maybe feeling overwhelmed. I get it. First time meeting parents can be intense. The next morning, she called. "Graham, I need to be honest with you about something," she said, her voice careful and measured. "I really like you, but I can't marry into poverty. I need financial security in my future, and I don't think your family situation is compatible with the life I want to build." Marry into poverty. That's how she saw my parents' life. "I understand," I told her. "I hope you find what you're looking for." She seemed surprised that I didn't argue or try to convince her otherwise. But honestly, what was I going to say? That my parents' values weren't good enough for her? That their modest lifestyle was somehow a reflection of my character? Here's what she didn't know, and what I didn't think to mention because it never seemed relevant. My parents recently decided to finally do something significant with their savings. After 35 years of living below their means and investing quietly, they're ready to make some moves that'll probably surprise a lot of people. The thing that's been bothering me isn't the breakup. It's realizing that in 8 months together, Sable never actually asked about my family's values, their history, or who they are as people. She saw furniture and made assumptions about character. Maybe that's on me for not explaining our family's philosophy about money and lifestyle. Or maybe it's exactly the kind of filter I needed without knowing it. Either way, I'm spending this weekend in tide pools with my research team, doing work that actually matters to me, with people who understand that substance isn't always visible from the surface. Edit. Reading these responses is validating. Yeah, a lot of you are pointing out that her reaction says more about her priorities than my family's worth. That's becoming clearer the more I think about it. Edit 2. For those asking about my parents' actual situation, let's just say appearances can be deceiving. They've always believed in living modestly regardless of what they could afford. Some people call it old-fashioned, but I call it having your priorities straight. Edit 3. Finn, my colleague, just texted after seeing this somehow. Dude, did she not know about your parents' thing? I guess everyone in my department knows something Sable never bothered to ask about. Update 1. Well, this got interesting faster than I expected. Sometimes small-town life has its advantages, especially when it comes to setting the record straight. Thursday morning, I was in my office preparing for my 9 a.m. marine ecology class when Finn knocked on my door with a copy of the local newspaper. "You might want to see this," he said, grinning like he knew something I didn't. Front page of the lifestyle section. Local couple makes anonymous $50 million donation to new marine research facility. The article described how Robert and Margaret Lott, my parents, had quietly donated enough money to fund an entire research center focused on coastal ecosystem preservation. The facility's going to be called the Graham Lott Marine Research Center. Apparently, they'd been planning this for months, working with the University Foundation to structure the donation properly. The something they wanted to do with their savings turned out to be funding the kind of research facility I've been dreaming about my entire career. The article mentioned that Robert had built and sold a regional waste management company for substantially more than anticipated market value, and that both he and Margaret had been longtime supporters of environmental education who preferred to give back quietly. $50 million. From the people Sable thought were living in poverty. By lunch, my phone was buzzing with texts from colleagues, friends, even former students who'd seen the story. The university president called to congratulate me personally. The dean mentioned they'd be fast-tracking my tenure review. But the strangest call came around 3 p.m. from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it called again. And again. Finally, I answered. "Graham, this is Sable. I saw the newspaper article." The tone of her voice was completely different from our last conversation. Nervous. Almost breathless. "I think there might have been some kind of misunderstanding about your family's situation," she continued. "I feel terrible about how things ended between us. Could we maybe talk?" I told her I'd think about it and hung up. Finn, who'd witnessed this entire phone call, just shook his head. "Some people, man, they only see value when it's printed in the newspaper. The thing that's bothering me isn't that she called. It's that she called the day the article ran. Not any of the 7 days since our conversation when she could have just missed me or realized she'd made a mistake about my family's character. My parents raised me to understand that real wealth whispers while fake wealth shouts. Sable heard whispering and assumed it was silence. Now that it's shouting from the front page, suddenly there was a misunderstanding. I'm starting to think the misunderstanding was mine, thinking that 8 months was enough time for someone to actually get to know who I am and where I come from. Edit. For those asking if I'm going to call her back, I honestly don't know. Part of me is curious what she thinks misunderstanding means in this context. Edit 2. My mom called this morning laughing. Apparently 3 different people at the grocery store asked if I was available because their daughters, granddaughters, nieces would love to meet a nice boy from such a good family. Small-town dynamics are hilarious. Edit 3. The university is already getting calls from researchers who want to apply for positions at the new facility. Looks like my parents' gift is going to change more than just my career prospects. Update 2. I thought the newspaper article would be the end of this story. I was wrong. Apparently, some people handle being wrong about wealth the same way they handle being wrong about everything else, by doubling down and making it worse. Last Tuesday, my mom called me at work, which she never does unless something's actually wrong. "Honey," she said, "I just had the strangest phone call from your friend Sable." My stomach dropped. What did she want? Well, she said she was concerned about you. Said you'd been acting strangely since your breakup and she wanted to make sure you were handling everything okay emotionally. Concerned about me, right. But then, my mom continued, she started asking very specific questions about our family business opportunities and whether we were looking for partners for future investments. I asked my mom to tell me exactly what Sable had said. She asked if we were planning more donations, whether you were involved in the financial decisions, and if we'd be interested in meeting with her about mutually beneficial arrangements. She kept calling me Mrs. Lott like we were in a business meeting. My mother, who taught elementary school for 30 years and can spot manipulation from across a playground, had recorded the entire conversation. "I've learned to document things when people say one thing but mean another," she explained. Wednesday morning, I was setting up equipment for a research dive when I saw Sable's BMW pull into the university parking lot. She'd driven an hour up the coast to find me at work. She walked into the Marine Science Building like she belonged there, wearing a business suit and carrying a leather portfolio. Several of my students stopped what they were doing to stare. "Graham," she said when she found me in the equipment room, "I'm so glad I caught you. We really need to talk." Finn was organizing dive gear nearby, close enough to hear everything. "I owe you a huge apology," Sable continued. "I completely misunderstood your family's situation. I feel terrible about how I judged your parents' lifestyle choices. Like modesty was a quirky preference instead of a value system. The thing is," she said, opening her portfolio, "I've been thinking a lot about us, and I realize I made a mistake. I was so focused on financial security that I didn't see the bigger picture." She pulled out what looked like a business plan. "I've been researching marine conservation investments. There's incredible growth potential in sustainable ocean technology, and with your expertise and your parents' resources, we could build something amazing together." We build something together. That's when I pulled out my phone and played my mother's recording. Sable's voice came through clearly. "Mrs. Lott, I'm wondering if you and Robert might be interested in discussing mutually beneficial arrangements for future philanthropic endeavors. I have extensive experience in strategic partnerships." The color drained from Sable's face as her own voice filled the equipment room. "You called my mother pretending to be concerned about my emotional state," I said, and then pitched her on business opportunities. Finn stopped pretending to organize gear and just stared. "That's not... I was concerned," Sable stammered. "But I also thought, look, we're both practical people. Your family has resources, I have business experience, and you have access to research opportunities. It makes sense." "What makes sense," I said, "is that you broke up with me because you thought my family was poor, and now you want back in because you found out they're not." She tried to salvage something. Talked about how relationships require financial compatibility, how she'd always cared about me but needed security, how we could have both love and business success. "I think you should leave," I told her. "Graham, don't let pride ruin what we could have together." "This isn't about pride," I replied. "It's about understanding the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you can do for them." After she left, Finn just looked at me and said, "Dude, that was the most mercenary thing I've ever witnessed outside of a nature documentary." My parents called that evening. They'd heard about the visit through the small-town communication network. "We're proud of how you handled that," my dad said. "Some people see opportunities where they should see relationships. The strangest part is that I'm not even angry. I'm just clear about the difference between someone who wants to be with you and someone who wants what comes with being with you." Edit. For those asking if I'm worried she'll try to contact my parents again, my mom's exact words were, "Let her try." 30 years of dealing with manipulative parents who wanted special treatment for their kids taught her to spot and shut down that behavior immediately. Edit 2. The business plan she showed me was actually pretty detailed. She'd clearly spent time researching marine conservation funding. I almost respect the effort if it wasn't completely designed to benefit her. Final update. I wasn't planning to update this story again, but enough has changed that it feels worth sharing the conclusion, especially for anyone who's wondered whether walking away from someone who only values you for your circumstances ever leads anywhere good. 2 years later, my life looks completely different in all the best ways. The Marine Research Center opened last fall, and I'm the youngest department head in the university's history. The work we're doing on coastal ecosystem preservation is getting national attention, and I wake up every morning excited about the problems we're solving. But the best part of this whole experience has been learning what it feels like when someone chooses you for who you are instead of what you represent. I met Jessica about 18 months ago through the most mundane circumstances possible. She's the bank manager who helped coordinate the paperwork for my parents' donation. And after months of professional interactions about foundation accounts and research funding, she finally asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. Not about banking stuff, she clarified. Just coffee. Our first conversation lasted 4 hours. We talked about everything: marine biology, small-town politics, family values, the weird pressure of suddenly having your life change because of circumstances beyond your control. She'd grown up in a similar situation, where her family had more resources than their lifestyle suggested, and she understood both the blessing and the burden of that kind of privilege. What struck me most was how she talked about my work. Not as a means to access my family's money, not as an impressive credential to drop at parties, but as something I was genuinely passionate about that happened to align with making the world better. Last month, I proposed. Nothing fancy, just the two of us on the beach near my parents' house, watching the sunset over tide pools I've been studying since I was a kid. Her response was perfect. Yes, but can we have the wedding reception at your parents' house? Your mom's casserole is legendary. We're planning a small ceremony this fall. Jessica insists she wants my mother to cook. Wants the same modest celebration that reflects our actual values instead of some performance for people who judge worth by venue costs. The contrast with Sable couldn't be starker. Jessica met my parents the same way Sable did. Dinner at the ranch house, same furniture, same unpretentious warmth. But Jessica's reaction was to ask my mom for the casserole recipe and to tell my dad stories about her own grandfather's work ethic. She saw what Sable couldn't see: that people who've earned wealth and choose to live modestly have figured out something important about what actually matters. Speaking of Sable, Finn mentioned she'd tried contacting 2 other professors in our department after the research center news broke. Apparently word spread about her approach to my family, and she moved to a different city sometime last year. I hope she found whatever she was looking for, but I'm grateful it wasn't with me. The funniest part of this whole story is that my parents' gift has attracted exactly the kind of attention they were hoping to avoid. Regional newspapers, university publications, even a small feature in a national magazine about quiet philanthropy. My mom finds the whole thing mortifying, while my dad keeps joking that they should have donated anonymously. But the attention has led to something meaningful. Other families with similar values and resources have reached out about supporting marine conservation work. We're building something bigger than my parents ever imagined, and it's being done by people who understand that real impact happens quietly, consistently, and without much fanfare. That's what I learned from this whole experience. The right person doesn't just want to be part of your success story, they want to help you write it. They see your family's values as assets rather than obstacles, and they understand that how people treat wealth says more about their character than how much wealth they have. Sable judged my parents by their furniture and missed everything important about who they are. Jessica sees them as the kind of people she hopes to become, and she's excited to build a life that reflects similar priorities. The difference between those two perspectives is the difference between someone who wants to use your advantages and someone who wants to share your values. I'm grateful for the clarity, even though getting there required someone showing me exactly who they were when money entered the equation. Sometimes the best relationships start after you've learned what doesn't work. Jessica and I are looking at houses near the research center, but honestly, we might just stay in my apartment above the tide pools. Some of the best things in life don't require upgrading. Edit. For those asking about wedding planning, we're doing everything ourselves with help from both our families. Jessica's parents are contributing food, my parents are handling flowers from my mom's garden, and we're using the beach behind their house for the ceremony. The whole thing will probably cost less than most people spend on a rehearsal dinner, and that feels exactly right. Edit 2. The research center is hiring if anyone's interested in marine conservation work. We prioritize passion over pedigree, which seems like a good philosophy for most things in life. Edit 3. Someone asked if I ever regret not trying harder to make things work with Sable. Honestly, no. You can't build a real relationship with someone who sees your family's character as a financial liability. The right person celebrates the same things you value instead of asking you to change them.